Now, I need 2 volunteers. I reckon, Brenton, do you want to jump off that camera and maybe get your dad, Andy? Can you wander down here too? I love volunteers that don't need to be asked. You can tell they're volunteers by the look on their face, can't you? That don't pick me sort of thing. Now, this is really simple. You don't have to talk. If you go up to the second step here, yep. So we've got father and son, and all you have to do is close your eyes. It's really easy. And then lift one foot off the ground. I want to see who can balance for the longest. So don't start yet. Woo woo. All feet down on the count of ready, set, go. Okay? Go. Eyes closed. See who's going to last the longest here. Oh, this is closer than I thought it would be. Oh, he's got the wobbles up. Whoa. It's all right, Kathy. Didn't fall. It would have been so much fun. I know he's got a crook back as well. So it's amazing how the competitiveness comes out in people, doesn't it? You put father and son beside each other. They normally love each other, but nah. It's just, okay, thank you. Appreciate it. No, that's it. You're done. So, Brendan, you can get back on the camera. Great. Now, there's a reason for that. The way God has made us physically, our balance has 3 systems that works together to help us. So, our eyesight, our inner ear, and our skin. They're all working together. And we fight gravity every day of our life. It stops us being flung off into outer space. But over time, those 3 systems physically deteriorate. Once you hit 40, your balance isn't as good. In your 70s and 80s, if you fall, it can be really a serious thing. And so gravity is always working against us, and God's given us this balance system. Now, as we get older, we can't change that we're getting older. But we have a bigger problem. As a species, our fundamental problem as a species is that we have this gravitational pull towards something else, and it's to blow up or shut down physically and emotionally, to overreact to things that upset us, circumstances that are out of our control sometimes. And most of us as adults are out of balance in some way. Now, if you have kids or grandkids, there's a pattern to their life, isn't there? They go to bed at night time. But sometimes you think it's never happened before, or at least at normal bedtime. And the amount of energy and passion and commitment and emotion that they can throw into a full-down meltdown because you want to get them to bed. And it's something they're going to do for the rest of their life every night. Now, little kids aren't the only ones that throw tantrums. 3-year-olds are not the only ones that get out of balance when they don't get what they want. As adults, we struggle with our overreactions sometimes, but they actually go much deeper, these overreactions we have, these out of balance things. I once heard of a psychologist who said, if it's hysterical, it's historical. That trauma from the past, bad experiences, can leave us fragile and unbalanced in our responses. Now, when Coral and I first got married, we lived on 5 acres at Wyong. And I had this dog kennels down on the back fence. And that's where my dogs lived. And when I let them out for a run, I'd get them to jump the boundary fence back and forward and taught them to jump. It was just vacant 5 acres next door to us. But then it got sold. And I remember one day I'd let the dogs out for a run, and the dogs were jumping over the fence, and the new neighbour who'd bought this 5 acres, I'd never met them before. And he was right up the top of the paddock, and he saw my dog jump over the fence into his place and back again. And he came down and he's screaming his head off at me. He's just so upset. I've never met the man in my life before. Obviously, he's had some bad experience with a dog in the past. Now, over time, they built a house, and over time, we restored that relationship that got off to a really bad start. We used to babysit their kids. But his reaction was just over the top. Now, we have a little thing in our brain called the amygdala. And it's like a smoke detector for danger. And if it senses a threat, it releases these really powerful stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, which increase our heart rate, our blood pressure goes up, we start breathing more. Now, when the danger has gone, everything just returns back to normal fairly quickly. But trauma, in all its different forms, especially stuff that's happened when you were a child, it changes that. And now advances in neuroscience has given us better understanding of how trauma changes brain development, and also this thing called self-regulation, which is our capacity to be balanced, to have a balanced response to things that trigger us in life. It also, trauma affects our ability to stay focused and in tune with other people. And in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I've been reading, the author writes these words. He says, trauma results in fundamental reorganisation of the way mind and brain manage perceptions. See, trauma increases the risk of misinterpreting situations as being dangerous when they're safe. It can also block the body's capacity to return back to normal, and it can leave you feeling anxious and stressed for long periods of time. Now, here's the problem. How can you get along with other people in village life, in connect groups, in families, at work, with friendships, if you can't accurately read what the other person is saying or doing? If you struggle, if you start to misinterpret, it leads to misunderstandings that can actually ruin relationships and friendships, and it's like you don't quite know why. Now, here's the thing about this amygdala, the smoke detector. It works closely with another little part of our brain called the hippocampus. Where do they get these names from? Like, that's Latin. I think it's Latin for big university. I don't know. It's just a silly little name. But this other part of the brain, what it does, when something happens, the amygdala smoke detector, it goes off, and it works with this other part that actually works on past history and interprets past history to the present, and it happens in milliseconds, and it happens when you're completely unaware of it. Now, I love tennis balls. We're throwing this around before, and Jeff, you have a mean arm. You are vicious. Like, I throw lollipops, but I'm gonna try it harder. I'm just gonna try this one. Now, you even reacted back there. Vicky, she just, now, well, yeah. Now, right at that moment, your amygdala and your hippocampus were working together, and your amygdala, it saw it as a threat. And Vicky, you were ducking and shrinking and going for cover. Jeff at the back there thought he could catch it, but he wasn't sure, right? But past experience, cricketer, he reckons he can catch it. You thought it was dangerous. And so that is a physical reaction before you've even had a thought. And it happens with relationships. And so if we have a faulty alarm system, if our smoke detector is being affected by past stuff, that is a real problem. And it creates these blow-ups or shutdowns where we even feel nothing. We withdraw, or we do both. Now, if God created this amazing system in our brains, if God put that there, if he wired that there, and if trauma interferes with our warning systems and our responses, then surely God, if God made us, he can fix us. And that when Jesus came and said that he had good news, it actually meant that some of this could be put back together if you have had stuff happen in your life. Now, this is where the number 110 really comes into play. 110 is a really significant number. It's a big number. It's not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. 110. 110 times in the New Testament, you'll find the Greek word sozo. I love this word. It's a brilliant word. It literally means healing and wholeness. Healing and wholeness. Healing. Every time you see it, it's healing and wholeness. Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And it's such a rich word and it comes from this root word that means safe. Now, when Jesus explains his mission on earth in John 3:17, he says this: he didn't come into the world to condemn the world, but to save. That's the word sozo, the world. And he showed us what that looked like. And then he sort of threw the baton to us and he said, it's your turn. And he said, go into all the world and share this good news. And he didn't leave us alone to do that by ourselves. He gave us the Holy Spirit so that we can get this baton and we can run with it. Now, in the first 4 books of the New Testament, Jesus refers to the kingdom of heaven coming to earth over 100 times. It's the culture of heaven coming into your life. And he said it's good news. And then 110 times throughout the whole of the New Testament, the word sozo is explained, that what this looks like, how it plays out in our life. Only 12 times in the whole of the New Testament, ever, is the word hell mentioned, or something that means hell. Only 12 times. Over 200 times, culture, heaven coming into your life, and sozo, the work of salvation, the healing and wholeness coming. Hell is real. Eternal separation from God is real. Pick the worst day of your life, the greatest heartache you've ever felt. In that moment, God's presence was still here. God was still with you in that moment. Take God away from the worst of the worst of the worst a human being can experience. That's hell. And it's forever. And it's torment of regret. And who wouldn't want to help someone you loved and cared for if their GPS in their head is taking them that way? Who wouldn't want to help them? But here's the problem. We, as the Western Church, we've done a really, really good job at telling people in our external village that they're condemned and going to hell. They know that. Ask them. They will tell you. We've told them that if you'll believe what we believe, you won't go there. But that's all they've heard. But if they're millennials or if they're Gen Zs, they probably haven't even heard that. we have done a really, really poor job at communicating healing and wholeness. Sozo, healing and wholeness. We haven't done a good job with that. And Paul tells us in Romans 2 that it's the kindness of God, it's the goodness of God that leads us to salvation, not the threat of hell. And I think perhaps the reason that we haven't communicated the power of sozo is that because we don't have a good theology of it. We don't have a good understanding of it. We don't even have a good experience of it. And so how, if we have not known this, how do you communicate that to someone else? And in Luke 19:10, Luke records these words of Jesus. Jesus says this, that he came to seek and save, that's the word sozo, what was lost. He says what was lost. He doesn't say who was lost. He says what was lost. And lost is not referring to a lost eternity. And this is not a verse where Jesus is saying he's came to earth to take us to heaven. And yet it's used for that. And the Greek word lost means marred, impaired, spoilt, rendered useless, destroyed. When the culture heaven comes into the life of a human being, that changes. And it can happen now. It's for now. It's not one day when we die. This is for now. And it brings balance back into our life. And when Jesus said that, it was in the context of the crowds criticising him. Because Jesus had just publicly restored a social outcast. Someone who didn't just live thinking people don't like me. They lived knowing people hated him. And when Jesus did what he did that day, the crowd was not happy with Jesus. And what Jesus did wasn't physically healing, it was something much, much deeper. It was the work of sozo. And when Jesus did this, the crowd starts comparing this person to themselves and they feel morally superior and they thought what Jesus did was wrong. Why do we compare ourselves with others? And if you're thinking it's because we're insecure, I don't think so. I think our insecurities it's the fruit of comparison. And comparison is the fruit of rejection. See, that day, Jesus stopped doing everything he was doing, where he was going, what he intended to do, and he invited himself to Zacchaeus' house for the day. And the crowd felt rejected because they're screaming and shouting. They've rushed to see Jesus. And he says, actually, I'm leaving all you and I'm going to go hang out with me mate Zach, me new best mate, Zach. And they felt rejected and they begin this comparison game. And Jesus says to them, he says this publicly, he says, that day, today, sozo, salvation, has come to Zacchaeus' house. See, the work of sozo is visible. You can see it. You can see it in Zacchaeus' willingness to fix what he'd done wrong relationally, to restore things with people. And sozo is for now, and it can be seen. And it means to restore, to protect, to rescue you from danger, to keep you safe. And I find it interesting in this book that I've been reading, The Body Keeps a Score, in the epilogue, the author writes this, more than anything else, being able to feel safe with other people defines mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. The work of sozo will always be seen relationally in our lives. You'll see it playing out, how people can relate to other people. It always enables you to feel safe with other people again if you haven't felt safe. Now, I've invited 2 special friends this morning. So, Kerry and Heather, can you come out here? And we're going to have a little chat with them about the work of sozo in their lives. So, if you want to grab a little seat, bring your seat over a bit closer, Kerry, and there's a microphone behind there too. Heather, can very pregnant women sit on these sorts of stools?
Yes.
You can, okay.
Not disabled, just
Not disabled, just pregnant, okay. I can remember when Cora was... I won't say anything. Yes,
That's
yes.
very wise.
Yes,
well
yes.
done.
So, Heather, the work of sozo. When you grew up, you actually had a struggle.
Yes.
And how did that leave you with people? How did you feel about people through what you went through as a child?
I grew up quite an anxious child. I would say that I struggled with anxiety. Excuse me, sorry.
Oh, you've got kids.
I forgot this. Thank you. All right, you go back.
Did you want to stay here too, Justin?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Hey, wait, Justin, here, come and sit on my knee. Hang on. Right. That's going to stop you going anywhere, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. Right. So, we're ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay.
I probably... Can I tell a little story?
You can do anything you like.
So, what you've been talking about this morning is my story. I went to a Catholic school and so obviously over our childhood we have traumas and they lead to different perceptions of the world, a bit like what Mandy was talking about a couple of weeks ago. But our Catholic priest came into my grade 4 classroom and he was going to give us a theology lesson, and he did. And he said that for everything that I did right, go back a little bit, in God's book, God's got this big book in heaven, and for everything I do right, I get a tick on one side of my page. But for everything that I do wrong, I get a cross. And at the end of my life, if I have more crosses than I have ticks, I will go to hell. And I feel actually quite shaky as I say that, because there was lots of other kids that heard that as well from this well-meaning priest. And so that's what I grew up with from grade 4. And then when I was 16, I gave my life to Jesus, or wrote it in a journal that, Jesus, I want to follow you. But it wasn't until I was 18 that I heard that grace wasn't just a thing that you say before a meal. I had no idea what grace was until I was 18 years old. I grew up in a Christian home, but in the Catholic school that I was brought up, that I was attending, I was really scared of going to hell. And so my perception of God is, do good, you get good. Do bad, and you get bad. And so I actually lived my life with other people, making sure that I always did the right thing. I actually grew up daily trying to do the right thing. And that caused a great deal of anxiety.
It did, and a fear.
Oh,
and it
huge.
left you feeling unsafe, didn't it?
Yes. And so I wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing was right. But with people, they don't always... I love report cards. I love getting a mark. I love it when someone critiques me, because then I know whether I've done good or bad, or whether I've done wrong or right, or I did. I've obviously had a journey to transformation, and I don't think that way anymore. I've got a different perception. But yeah, people were scary, because some people don't tell you if you did a good job or you did a bad job. And so you're left wondering, was that a tick or a cross? And you just don't know. You don't know. So that was probably what you're talking about. Sometimes wrong theology can be very, very damaging.
Yeah. And the thing is that in your life, through all sorts of other things as well, you ended up with a place where you just did not feel safe with people.
Yes.
And so would it be true to say that the restoration, the work of God's salvation, God's healing and wholeness has been that you now feel safer with people? It's
actually really amazing. And as you say that it's available now, I'm a living testimony to it is available right now. And it's not a switch. It's not a light switch. It wasn't for me. It wasn't just one day I woke up and got, oh, all right, new perspective, I'm safe. It has been a journey. So 16, gave my life to Christ. 18, learned that grace is undeserved favour. And through experience of God's love, learned that there are people who, you know, they don't think that do good, get good, do bad, get bad. 26 years old, stuffed up pretty badly. And I remember driving in a car, looking up at the clouds, and they were pure white. And I felt really, I guess you could say, stained. And I remember just having this revelation, that's how God sees me. Even though I've done bad, there's no cross. He just washes us. He just purifies us. And I remember that being a real experience of grace. And then from that point, I had a particular person in my life, an older lady, and she knew a very different God to me. So from about 26, my perception of God changed dramatically because she introduced me to Jesus. I'd given my life to Jesus at 16, but I don't think I really knew the Jesus that this lady knew. And as she sort of started talking about him and was really trying to introduce me to her Jesus, I really resisted it at first. I'm like, no, you have to still do good. And look, you know, once you know Jesus, you want to do good, but it's not from fear. It's out of a real love for Jesus. So.
And right now, you actually can be vulnerable and share some of your story and feel safe with people in a very different way now, can't you?
Yeah. I probably was in a trapped place for many years. I remember when this lady was trying to introduce me to Jesus in a way. No. I really resisted it because I was hiding. I was making sure that I was safe, and it was a slow process to come to even trust Jesus. But once I started trusting Jesus, yes, I was then able to realise that it's okay to really trust people, not just in the physical, but in the emotional and the spiritual as well.
Because the reality is people can still hurt you, even when you see them as safe, but God is bigger than the hurt.
Yes. Yeah, even now, so 26, I'm 36, so 10 more years on, yeah, I go into situations knowing full well that I could get really hurt, and I do let myself be quite vulnerable, more vulnerable than I ever have with people, and there's a real reward and gift in that. Like, I've grown and I've been blessed by that, and it blesses the other person as well. But I have come to that realisation that, this could actually be a real big ouch. But I then fall into the loving arms of God and Jesus, knowing that even if this hurts, this is a huge risk, like a massive risk, or it might not be. I just know that my God will be there and that I will be okay. There's a verse in the Bible and it says, no thing will harm you. And so coming from a place where the world was really scary, I was scared that mosquitoes were going to bite me. That's a physical level. Emotionally, didn't share a whole heap with many people because I didn't want to do the wrong thing. Didn't want to say the wrong thing, to a place where I feel quite free. And yeah, I feel very safe, actually. Yep. Yeah, I do.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Heather. And Kerry, your journey is a different story, but you have experienced God's healing and wholeness, and it's not something, because you've been sort of part of church for a long time, but it isn't something you found in your local church, was it? So tell us a little bit about this journey for you, this healing and wholeness.
I was raised in a Christian home and knew the Lord. I don't remember a time where I didn't know him. But I grew up with a lot of lies in my head that I told myself. But they came from other people and I believed them, a little bit like Heather. But they shaped how I responded to people. And it was years ago I was actually aware of the fruit of the Spirit. And I'd go through it and go, why don't I have joy? Like, I should have, like, the list. And joy was just something that just wasn't flowing. Like, I could be happy in a fun party or something, but it just wasn't natural. And so I recently did a course. I had to go to the United States via the internet to do this
cheaper.
course.
It's cheaper that way. Yeah, it is.
To do this course, and it was it's called Anointed to Soar, and that's like, that's what I want. And through that, it was just a little 8-week course that's taken me about a year because I just had so much stuff to unpack, and I didn't realise how much stuff. And God showed me how much of a hold rejection had on me. And it was, like you were saying before, a little thing when I was a kid that built on another little thing when I was a kid and another thing. And then when I was an adult, I had lots more built on that same thing. And to the point where I didn't feel like I was as important as everyone else. I developed an orphan spirit where I believed I was valuable to God, but everybody else was one peg above me. And so I worked at keeping them happy because it was kind of like a spirit of shame as well over me. Like, I just didn't have the worth that they had. That I had a bit of worth as a Christian, but everybody held that little bit more worth, which God doesn't work that way. And my head knew that, but my heart was full of the rejection. So somewhere there, God was like, had this little rejection space for me. And I had to learn that he didn't. And I had to be set free from that. But having that spirit over me, I needed somebody else to pray that out. It was not something I could do on my own. And
this is the work of God's sozo, his healing and wholeness. It comes through the village life. That's what it's intended to. Now, you've been part of church life for a long time, and those things haven't ever changed, right? And when we started Open House Church in Sydney, we had my brother Ken come up, and we trained everyone from the very beginning in prayer ministry in a way that could bring healing and wholeness to people. And as we grow with Red Gum, we can talk about buildings, but really the building's just a shell. It's actually what takes place in our lives. It's the only thing that really counts. And it's very easy to get hurt and damaged in life. And God's plan, our physical balance deteriorates. But God's plan is that our spiritual, our emotional, our mental capacities will come back into balance. They'll come back to rightness and wholeness, right? And I'm so excited that Kerry has been fantastic. And in the training there, that enables you to also pray for people to receive what you've received. And Jesus gave us this baton to pass on. It's not just a story to tell, it's an action. You see it play out in people's lives. So thank you very much to both of you. And Heather, when are you due? Because you've been pregnant for a long time.
I don't normally tell people the exact date because then you get this, influx of text messages. The 24th of December. So I will tell you this.
Yes.
So we're hoping this baby wants to come really late.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be exciting.
24th of December.
Just
we'll see what happens.
Just so you know, I have a dog that has a birth date on the 24th of December. Just so if you're looking for names, her name's Alice, but Brooklyn named it. Yeah.
The word tact comes to mind.
Tact. Right.
You've got great tact. No filter. It's okay.
I'm trying to see if you still feel safe with me. You see, yes.
Very safe.
Well, thank you very much. We might want to come back and. No, that's fine. Okay. Well, we're going to we're going to leave it at that and stay around for a tea, coffee, say good day to someone. And it's just really wonderful to be together in a way where we can be open and honest and vulnerable. And I really appreciate Kerry and Heather and kids. So we'll see you next... In fact, next week, Kerry and Steve are renewing their vows, their 25th wedding anniversary, and they're going to publicly renew their vows, and Steve's going to share a little story of God's work of sozo in his life. So I'm really looking forward to that. So we'll see you next week. Thanks.